Help support the show by joining the Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. Also, hit that like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to QnA, the show where I take your questions and answer them here in video format. Thank you for everybody who subscribed, hit that notification bell, and answered the question prompt. Tons of questions to get through on this one. So shout out to y'all for showing up. Let's get through some of these questions. I took about 12 of them because there were just so many questions that needed to be answered. Q Blue says, hey Q, people say others won't want to play for the Browns if the Browns void Watson's money. However, do you think there's a world where the players understand why the Browns would void Watson's contract, considering that he does make so much money and is so bad at football? Like, similar to fans cheering when he got hurt, this guy isn't just another player. Some fans see him as the guy who ruined their beloved football team. Here's the thing with that, though. Let's go back to when he got hurt. When he got hurt, fans understood why people would boo Deshaun Watson in that situation, but the players, right? No, those were the people who were upset about that situation. The fact is that the players have to be hyper aware, and this is how it works whenever you are an employee, right? So think about this in your own life, right? In your own job, you can't let the bosses go over the line on a coworker you don't like, because you might not mind it if they go over the line and fire a coworker or discipline a coworker that you don't like or that you think deserves it, even though technically they're not supposed to be able to do that. If they break that line for that coworker, you'd be fine with it, right? But what that does is give that employer the permission to act that way for everybody. Dominique Foxworth brings up a great example of this when he's talking about the players union. And he's like, the reason the players union fights really, really hard, and this is another thing, right? You're going to have to deal with the players union if you try to avoid these guarantees, because the reason the players union fights really, really hard on everything, no matter who it is because when he was the players union president, he kind of let the NFL slide on punishing Pac-Man Jones because everybody in the NFLPA was tired of Pac-Man Jones at the time. If y'all don't know who Pac-Man Jones is, because I forget that I'm old now, Pac-Man Jones, he was known for causing trouble, right? Talented player, known for causing trouble, caused a ton of trouble. And the players were tired of Pac-Man Jones. The owners were tired of Pac-Man Jones. They wanted to give the commissioner extra power to discipline him, but the way that the CBA was written did not grant that power to the commissioner. So what the players ended up doing was allow Roger Goodell to have the exempt list. And everybody who was involved in that decision from the NFLPA regrets allowing that to happen because it gave Roger Goodell way, way, way too much power. This is the issue that you run into with voiding Watson's guarantees. Yeah, maybe somebody can understand why you avoid Watson's guarantees, but once you cross that line, who's to say that it's not going to happen to me? Because you're a fool if you think it's only going to happen to the person who you think deserves it, right? If you give that power out, that power will be used. Next question comes from Luke, who says, hey Q, what are your thoughts on Emeka Egbuka, and do you think the Browns should add a wide receiver in the draft or through free agency? I think through free agency. This is pretty, like, if you find somebody that's a good value in the draft, why not? I don't really stay strict onto you have to draft these positions in the draft. It's more about best player available, the talent you see on the board when you're up there to select. So, yeah, if Emeka Egbuka's up there and it makes sense, go ahead, get him. But if there's no wide receivers that make sense, I'm not going to throw a fit because the Browns don't draft a wide receiver in this year's class, especially because it's not a particularly strong class to draft a wide receiver. Gabe Perry says, hey, Q, been a fan since 2018. Which prospects and running back do you think the Browns will prioritize evaluating? Thanks for helping me get through the late night studying. Appreciate that, brother. Yeah, so I think Caleb Johnson is going to be who they end up like getting excited about. There's really no need to go after a third down running back because they have Jerome Ford. Jerome Ford can be a third down running back, and third down running backs just aren't that hard to find nor draft. So there's really no reason to go out of your way for a third down running back. Caleb Johnson, though, unique combination of size and speed, smoothness, vision. That is who they're going to prioritize. The more rare athletes that you could get at the running back position, right? I think that's going to be what they look for. I think they probably want to, and given their short yardage issues, they should probably want somebody big, right? Omarion Hampton is another name that's been thrown out there as well. But that's probably the type of athlete that they're going to prefer at running back, or at least I would hope they would. Q says, hey, Q, there is one QB I've seen nobody talking about in the QB market. It's Jake Browning. He was 4-3 in 2023, had a QBR in the top 13. The Bengals would let him go for a 4th-round pick. What do you think? The problem with Jake Browning is that you would have to go in division to trade for him. And I'll just put it like this. Unless you're going to offer the Bengals a deal they can't refuse, they are going to do nothing that they perceive as helping Cleveland's quarterback room problem. They would rather not take a 3rd-round pick than give, like, if they really, like, let's say the Bengals thought that Jake Browning could start in the league, right? I don't know what the Bengals think about him. But let's say Bengals brass Duke Tobin thinks that Jake Browning is a starting quarterback in the NFL. There's not enough in the world to make them trade him to Jake Browning. Remember, the price for A.J. McCarron, who was not an NFL starter, was what? A 2nd-round pick in between the Bengals and the Browns? And given that the Browns roster's at a much more competitive place than it was with Hugh Jackson, there is nothing in the world that the Bengals are going to do to allow you to get Jake. You just got to let him hit free agency before you can go after him. So trading for Jake Browning, the reason you ever heard anybody talk about it, the Bengals ain't going to do it. Bengals ain't going to do nothing to help the Browns quarterback situation because they absolutely do not benefit from doing that. They're trying to compete. They're trying to win the division. If they trade you a quarterback they feel like is better than what the Browns have, they're helping the Browns. It's not worth any draft picks that we send them because they're trying to win right now. So that's why, in my opinion, I don't think it's really realistic, is the Bengals, if they thought much of him, they're not going to be willing to give you anything for him. And even if they don't think much of him, they're going to try to hit you over the head with the price. But yeah. Noah says, why were people viewing the latest Deshaun Watson restructure as a disastrous move for the organization? National media and local media are even framing it as a colossal mistake because the Browns are the ones that did it, right? The Browns right now don't have a lot of benefit of the doubt, especially when it comes to the national press. So quite literally anything they do is going to be perceived negatively, right? And this is backlash from making the Watson trade. This, like, you lost benefit of the doubt once you made the Watson trade, and especially once the Watson trade ended up being a failure, right? You lost all benefit of the doubt in the front office from the national media as far as how they perceive moves that you did. Jerry Jeudy, they were all ready to dump on that one, right? The restructures last year, they were ready to dump on. Anything the Browns are going to do from a national perspective is not going to be viewed through the lens of what's actually happening and what's actually true. It's going to be viewed through the lens of, well, how do we talk about this in the terms of Cleveland being bad, because anything Cleveland does must be bad. So they're just going to frame everything Cleveland does, positive or negative, as a mistake or as bad, because that's how they talk about the Browns. That's where the Browns' trust is with them. And it's up to the Browns to win games to get more benefit of the doubt. Like I say this all the time, the Philadelphia Eagles and the Cleveland Browns could do the same exact thing, and you'll hear 2 different reactions, because Howie Roseman has the benefit of the doubt and Andrew Berry doesn't. Because Howie Roseman did not make the Deshaun Watson trade, and because Andrew Berry technically did. That is why the reactions are so colossally different. It's not because the moves are that different. It's just how you perceive the move based on who's doing it is much different. Something to keep your eye on, right? That's why I try not to overreact when like somebody national says something about the Browns, because you have to understand that that's likely the case. Jay says, I'm not sure what to make of Hunter. Do you think he's a better corner than Johnson? Yes. Or a better receiver than Tet? Yes. In my mind, he has to be one or the other to make sense to pick him ahead of those two, because there's no way they're allowing him to play two-way in the league. We'll tackle the two-way question a little bit later. But yeah, I mean, look, there are two non-quarterbacks that could go number one. Abdul Carter, Travis Hunter. That is the quality of prospect Travis Hunter is. I have my concerns about Travis. I prefer Abdul over Travis, but it wouldn't be a massive reach if Travis went at one, the same way it wouldn't be a massive reach if Abdul went at one. The next question comes from Stadium, who says, do you think the Browns could pick at 2 and trade up into the top 10 or 5 like Houston did last year? So what, you thinking like maybe get Abdul Carter at 2 and then trade a bunch of picks to go get Shedeur Sanders? I mean, yeah, sure, they could do that, but the Browns they don't have to do that, right? Like if they want to pair their quarterback that they believe in, like if the Browns truly think that Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward are franchise quarterbacks, which is yet to be proven whether they think that's the case or not, then they should just take them at 2, right? If you want to pair that guy with an elite edge rusher, you already have Myles Garrett on the roster. Like Houston had to do that because they didn't have much talent on that roster, so they wanted to double up on some guys that they thought were pretty unpass-upable in C.J. Stroud and Will Anderson. That is not the case for the Browns. The Browns are probably not going to do that because they're just not in that kind of a situation. That being said, it would be cool if they did that, but yeah, I doubt it. Matt says, with the top pick in the second round, would it be worth trading back into the first to secure a 5th round option on the pick? And what would that cost? It would make sense if it's for a quarterback. And what that would cost, let me look up the cost of that normally. Yeah, so pretty much every time this has ever been done, it usually takes a 4th round selection. That's what the price is. So to swap picks, to get back in the first round, if you're early second, it'll be about a 4th round pick that'll get you up in there. So that's what the cost would be to do it. So a 4th round selection in 2024 in the current draft, well, 2025, my bad, the current draft, or a 3rd round selection in 2026. That's what it would cost to move back into the first round if you want to secure that 5th year option. Again, you'll probably only do it if like a quarterback fell there. Let's say Shedeur Sanders falls all the way to 32 and the Browns are like, you know what, we're going to do it there. That makes sense at 32. Then they would give up a 4th round pick, slide back into the first round, get the 5th year option, trade Shedeur Sanders. We'll trade for Shedeur Sanders. So that's like an example of like what the Browns could do there. Sad 99 says, what are our actual chances of getting Carter at 2? A few weeks ago, it seemed like a lot, but now it seems like recently their narrative has been changing about Sanders and Ward, beginning to seem like more and more likely that other positions like DN will be hot at the top of this draft. I expect, right? We keep talking about how bad this quarterback class is, and a lot of the talk about the quarterbacks in this class is about whether you need one, not necessarily whether these are players that you want to go out and grab regardless of need. Like, think about it like this. If you had Kyler Murray, would you draft any of these quarterbacks? Like, whoever your Mendoza line, if you had Geno Smith, would you draft one of these quarterbacks? If you had... who else is another borderline quarterback? Like if the Browns still had Baker Mayfield, would you draft the quarterback at the top of this draft? Legit question. I don't know the answer to that. That's going to be a different answer from everybody who hears that question. But that's like my thing is like usually if a prospect is worth that 1 or 2 overall pick, you're talking about somebody that you're willing to, you know, we're going to get this guy out the way so we can draft this dude because he's going to be the franchise, right? In a way that a tier 3 guy or any of those tier 3 starters that I mentioned can't. Like that's my barometer for if you think you should draft the quarterback. If you had name your favorite tier 3 quarterback, right? The guy who is a starter but not a starter you envision winning a championship with. Picture that guy and ask yourself if the team you love had that guy and one of these two prospects were on the board, would you be willing to draft the prospect and replace that guy with that prospect? If your answer is yes, then you think the Browns should probably draft the quarterback at 2. If your answer to that is no, then you should probably want the Browns to stay away from quarterback. But that's really what it comes down to. How good do you think these prospects are? Now, yeah, I do agree with you. I do think that by the time we get to the draft, especially like if Carter has a crazy pro day or combine, he could be the guy who goes number 1 overall. Another thing to think about is the Titans will have a new GM for the first time, like a first-year GM. And usually first-year GMs don't go all in on a quarterback in year 1 unless that guy's like a guaranteed lock. Like unless it's like a Trevor Lawrence year where everybody's telling you this is the number 1 overall pick, right? Usually a GM is not really too excited to take a risk on the quarterback in year 1. That's for a lot of reasons, right? One, there's not a ton of pressure for that GM to win in year 1. So they're going to be more likely to punt on quarterback if there's no real reason to grab if there's no prospect there that grabs them in the way that you want a quarterback prospect to grab you in the first round at least. And like if you look at the teams that have drafted like the reaches, right? Mitchell Trubisky, Daniel Jones, et cetera, Kenny Pickett. These aren't done by first-year GMs. Honestly, I don't think the Titans really fit the description of a team that's guaranteed to go quarterback at 1. I feel like the Browns are, and look, I'm nervous about this because I'm not team draft the quarterback guy. But I feel like the Browns are the team that screams they could reach for a quarterback. Not because of anything I'm hearing about them, but just like if you look at the traditional profile of teams that reach for a quarterback, the Browns are usually that team, right? It's usually a team with a GM that's been there a few years, a team with a roster that they're trying to get the most out of, a team that feels like they're not that far away from winning. Like that usually leads to taking a lot of risk at the quarterback position. We've already seen that in play when they went out to trade for Deshaun Watson. Like the Browns are the team that feel like they could do it, but I don't know if even they are going to do it. You feel me? So like when it comes to the other teams, right, especially the teams in the first year of a head coach and a GM, it feels even more or less likely that they're going to go quarterback. But we'll see. It's a long draft process. We'll see what happens. Next question comes from CTG Cement, who says, "Hey Q, I don't have to go in depth, but could you give me a brief explanation of what you mean when you say the Browns are going back to the old offense? What type of schematic changes could this possibly result in? Offensive line, perhaps?" A lot of this stuff would be run game focused. You would see the return of a lot more 12 personnel, so 2 tight ends, 1 running back. And it's going to be more about how they use the run game and how they flow that run game into the passing game. For the last few years, in order to get Deshaun Watson on his feet, there's been a hard split between what the running game looks like and what the passing game looks like. And I think that's why play action has looked so terrible the last few years, is because it used to be that every play felt like it was coming from the same box with the Cleveland Browns. So when they run play action, there's a lot more to consider because the Browns run everything out of that same box. But now it felt like run plays were coming out of this box and pass plays were coming out of this box. And that made the play action way less effective in 2023. So in 2024, they tried to move everything over to the Deshaun Watson box, but their roster was still in the Kevin Stefanski box, and it was a disaster. So now what I think they're trying to do is just jumble everything back into the one box, put the offense back under that box, and have the run game and the pass game become married again in the same way that it was before Watson got traded for or started the game for the Cleveland Browns. So I think that's what they're wanting to go back to. It's really going to be a change for the run game more than anything. But thank you for the question, CTG. Next one comes from Dan, who says, This is more of a hypothetical, but say the Modell law works and the team is forced to offer someone a chance to buy the Browns. Who do you think is the most likely candidate to try to buy the Browns and for how much? Let me tell you, man. If the Modell law works, and which it's very likely not to, but if the Modell law works and the city forces a sale of the team to somebody, I'm telling you right now, it does not matter who buys the team. Because how do I put this kindly so I'm not being mean for no reason? There is nobody who has the resources it would take to buy the Cleveland Browns that would also double as some kind of amazing football mind. Who would be the most likely candidate in that situation? Have no clue. Don't really care. Probably the people who own the color purple. It's not going to be anybody we know. I don't keep up with Billionaires Digest. So I don't know who's rich enough to buy the Browns, right? So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know, nor do I care. I don't think a new owner solves the problems that the Cleveland Browns have. Honestly, I think it would create a lot more issues with the Cleveland Browns because then we're talking about a new owner coming in. We're definitely just going to start firing people just to fire people's sake. And we're going to do some of the same dumb stuff that this franchise did when they sold the team to Jimmy Haslam, right? Like, I'm not trying to go over new ownership growing pains again. Like, it's not fun. Like, and ultimately the reward for going through those growing pains is like maybe he becomes just a little bit less incompetent. Yeah, or she. Let me be inclusive on this. But yeah, I don't care who buys the team if they are forced to sell it, because the odds are whatever billionaire can afford to buy the team is going to be massively incompetent and not really be qualified enough to make the decisions that they're going to be allowed to make when it comes to the Cleveland Browns. And now you're just adding somebody who's even more naive. Like, imagine if Jimmy Haslam, then at least, like, the one thing I think is good about Jimmy Haslam is he has the ghost of 0-16 on his back and drafted Johnny Manziel. And that kind of fear has at least made him a little bit more hands-off. Jay says, I've been pretty torn about the whole idea of not drafting a quarterback second overall because the odds of finding a long-term starter after the first round seems so much worse. Punting it to next year seems risky because we don't know where we'll be picking. And Mahomes and Watson were picked 10th and 12th because everybody was low in their class. That is not true. But choosing to go there with you, assuming that the immediate plan is Kirk Cousins type bridge to be your starter, where will we find our young guy to either develop in this draft or to pick early in another draft? How many years do you think you can realistically do that? How long of a bridge do you think a bridge quarterback could be for us? We just have to have it figured out already. All right, so there's a lot in that question. Let's start with how long of a bridge do you think a bridge quarterback could be for us before we just need to have it figured out? A bridge quarterback, that buys you about a year or two, right? You're going to be in the playoff hunt. Maybe you make a playoff game. Maybe you win a playoff game. It depends on how good that bridge quarterback is. Like, Alex Smith was a bridge quarterback for the Kansas City Chiefs for about 5-6 years. Andy Dalton was a bridge quarterback for the Cincinnati Bengals for about 8 years. So if you get a really high quality bridge, you can ride that out for a long time until the right opportunity comes along. And then you start having the conversation of like, hey, when do we need to move off of this guy to upgrade from him? So, yeah, there's not a lot of guarantees when it comes to quarterback, because even if you draft the quarterback second overall this year, there's no guarantee that guy's going to be good, even if this were a great class to get a quarterback. And the fact is that this is just not a great class to get a quarterback. Shedeur Sanders is not better as a prospect than like the top 3 quarterbacks in 2023's draft. So it's not that kind of a year. My thing is, you're going to have to take a swing either 2026, 2025, or 2027. if you can buy yourself a couple of years and get to 2027, you want to get to 2027. But if you can just buy yourself 1 year and get to 2026, I think taking your swing in that draft is much better than taking your swing in this draft. So you have to take your swing eventually. I do agree with that. You can't like wait 5 years unless you really land on a super high quality bridge that could start for you for 8 years. But that's unlikely. So yeah, you got to take your swing somewhere within the next 3 draft classes if you're the Browns. But that's it for Q&A. Y'all have a great day. Have a better night. Peace.